Sonic the Hedgehog CD, the classic Sonic game that either fans love or they really don't care for it much. Hello everyone, Alec Elder the SideQuest Gamer here, and today I'm going to take a look at one of the more polarizing classic Sonic games. As to where I stand with it, you'll find out. This is a classic Sonic game not a lot of people play due to the poor sales of the Sega CD add-on for the Sega Genesis, which was mandatory in order to play Sonic CD. It later got a PC release and was also released on the Sonic Gems collection for the GameCube. An enhanced port of it, fixed up by Christian Whitehead aka Taxman, and his friend Stealth, was released for Xbox 360, PS3, and I believe Steam and the mobile devices. But it was first released exclusively for the Sega CD add-on in the year of 1993. It was developed by Sonic Team right after Sonic 1, believe it or not, and Sonic 2 were originally one project Sonic Team worked on, but eventually separated into two completely different projects, with Yuji Naka leaving Sonic Team to join the Sega Technical Institute. While Sega Technical Institute and some of Sonic Team worked on Sonic 2, other members of Sonic Team worked on Sonic CD. CD ended up being released 1 year after Sonic 2, and they became vastly different games from each other. Even the spin dash wasn't the same. Sonic 2 reinvented everything about Sonic 1, but Sonic CD felt a little more like Sonic 1, with faster speed and level design built more around exploration rather than speed itself. The checkpoint markers are the same from Sonic 1, the special stage entrances are the 50 ring at the end of level giant rings, which are the same from Sonic 1, and some of the levels, while vastly different, are still kind of in the style of Sonic 1 in terms of themes and even gameplay. Although, unlike Sonic 1, instead of rescuing animal buddies from robots and capsules, you are now rescuing flowers. Yeah. The story, however, is a little more interesting than Sonic 1 and 2's story, in my opinion. It involves Sonic finding an orbital planetoid known as Little Planet, ominously tethered to a mountain, and then he climbs up the tether to investigate. Turns out Robotnik is after the Time Stones on Little Planet and is roboticizing the planet, and even going to the past to install robot generators, which could ruin the future of Little Planet. Following Sonic is Amy Rose, who is also a hedgehog and has a crush on the hero, but Sonic ignores her until Robotnik's newest creation, Metal Sonic, kidnaps Amy, and now Sonic has to rescue Amy and save Little Planet from having a bad future. As to where Sonic CD fits in the Sonic timeline, I don't know. It is canon in the timeline since Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2 makes heavy reference to the game. And Metal Sonic is a recurring character, but does it take place after Sonic 1 but before 2, or in between Sonic 2 and Sonic 3? Does it take place after Sonic 3 but before Sonic Adventure? I don't know, I think it might take place after Sonic 3 but before Adventure, because Sonic does say to Tails, "Long time no see," implying they went their separate ways after Sonic 3. And Amy does return as a character in Sonic Adventure. But the thing that's weird is, Sonic CD is so close to Sonic 1 in terms of style, so maybe it might take place after Sonic 1? I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter. The biggest difference between Sonic 1, 2, and CD is that rather than a horizontal point A to point B side-scrolling level design, Sonic CD's levels are more vertical than horizontal, mainly because one of the optional side quests involving exploring the levels, and as Sonic-esque levels built for exploration, they're excellent. But for non-completionists who don't care about getting the good ending, would finish the levels faster than the levels in Sonic 1 and 2, making the game feel shorter and easier. One of the cool things about the levels is that the past and future signs, where if you activate them and run at full speed, you'll go into the respective time period and see the past and good or bad future versions of that level, meaning you're actually getting 4 slightly altered levels in the space of 1, which is kind of cool. The first zone, being Palm Tree Panic, is kind of like Green Hill Zone with a more tropical theme. It's a very good level to start out with, and the adorable Amy Rose, who later becomes one of the most annoying Sonic characters, at least when they gave her a voice actress, follows you around and occasionally hugs you. Nice. It's a very easy and very short zone, but nice one to start out with nonetheless. The second zone, being Collision Chaos, is kind of like Spring Yard Zone with all of its springs and some platforming. The beginning of it where Metal Sonic kidnaps Amy Rose and then you go out to rescue her in addition to stopping Robotnik's next evil scheme. One notable thing about Collision Chaos is that the Robotnik fight is kind of in the style of the pinball course, which might have been the inspiration for Sonic's Spinball. The third zone is titled Tempest, which is kind of like Labyrinth Zone, except less annoying and actually very enjoyable. Sure, you'll spend 70% of the time underwater, but that's a lot better than Labyrinth Zone's 90%, I will say. The Robotnik boss battle is funny because instead of chasing him upward like in Labyrinth Zone, you chase him downward and then fight him, where he surrounds himself with, get this, oxygen bubbles. It's kind of funny because it would be like if Bowser shielded himself from Mario with invincibility stars in the next Mario game. Quartz Quadrant Zone, the fourth zone in the game, is supposed to be like a mining level, but I get more of a metallic feel. It's pretty fun but rather spacious if you ask me. Wacky Workbench, the fifth zone in the game, is more spring-loaded than Spring Yard Zone and Collision Chaos combined. And then there's those electric wires you need to avoid as well as enemies. It's not bad, but rather tedious and kind of flawed if you ask me. Stardust Speedway is kind of like Starlight Zone from Sonic 1, except it's more like a pinball maze and is one of the more confusing zones in the game. At least in the end, you race Metal Sonic to the death and rescue Amy in a fight where I can say Sonic literally met his match. But even with Amy rescued, you have unfinished business with Robotnik. You know, rescuing Amy in Sonic CD may be like mission accomplished if it weren't for her returning in Adventure and Beyond as one of the most annoying characters in the franchise. You know, people give Rise of Lyric a lot of hate, but if there's one thing that game did right, it was making Amy a more three-dimensional, likable character. Then there's Metallic Madness Zone, which is very similar to Scrap Brain Zone from Sonic 1, except more of a labyrinth. The bomb enemies from Sonic 1's Scrap Brain Zone and Starlight Zone return in much larger sizes. This is also the only level with a bottomless pit from what I saw in the game. The final boss is the first in the series to allow Sonic to carry rings within the fight, and it's a pretty easy boss fight with the rings. If anything, it's kind of underwhelming compared to the fight with Metal Sonic, but I guess I'll take it for what it is. Now, what do I think of the levels? Well, people commonly dismiss it as bad, but not when you get to know the true intent of why they're more vertical than horizontal. They were built more around exploring the levels from the past and future signs, and if you go to the past, you have to destroy the robot generators hidden throughout every Act 1 and Act 2 of each zone. Miss any of the robot generators, and you won't be able to get the good ending, unless you get the good ending the other way, which would involve getting all 7 time stones. Now, the time stones are the Chaos Emeralds, except you don't get Supersonic when you get all 7. And they are collected by getting 50 rings to the end of each level in order to access a giant ring, kind of like the first game. And that would take you to a special stage where you have to destroy all the UFOs in a rather claustrophobic 3D plane. This special stage kind of sucks, but I actually prefer it over Sonic 1 and 2's special stages. It's not hard if you know what you're doing. Get all 7 time stones in the game, and all the robot generators from the past will automatically be destroyed, giving you the good ending. But like Sonic 1 and 2, the ending is only 7 seconds of extra scenes, but knowing Sonic CD introduces a save feature, I was more compelled to go for the good ending since the other two were a beat in one sitting and don't get a game over types of games, which could be very unforgiving. I was in my mid-teens when I played the 4 classic Sonic games, meaning I have no nostalgia for those games except for my teens, which isn't nearly as powerful as every other YouTuber's nostalgia who have replayed the game over and over 20 years, which is infinitely stronger than my love for the Sonic franchise. You see, I am kind of a completionist type. If I like the game so much, I want to do all the side stuff to beat it, but the restart after a game over mechanic in Sonic 1 and 2 prevents me from having that, and while it wasn't bad for its time since it encouraged replayability, good games like Sonic CD and Sonic 3 and Knuckles are infinitely replayable, and they have a save system. For Sonic 1 and 2, Sonic Team could have at least put a password system or an infinite continue system to make the game more forgiving, and I guess the restore points on the virtual releases are close enough, but still. The graphics of the game are near identical to Sonic 1's graphics, except that the textures are more carefully designed to convey a better sense of atmosphere. The level appearance changes when you go to the past or good or bad futures of each level, and let me tell you, the bad future of each zone gives me the chills when I look at their apocalyptic state accompanied by the creepy music. Especially Stardust Speedway. From a visual standpoint, they're the best in the series in my opinion, just for making you feel something other than adrenaline. Like when you go to the future and see it's all a technological wasteland, then go to the past to see it's primitive with overgrowth and stuff, you see that the future is at stake and you need to save it and make it a good future, because the good futures are very utopian while the bad futures are dystopian and smog-filled, and it looks like the planet is at the end of its life. The music is by far the most praised aspect of Sonic CD, and also the most debated because this game has two soundtracks, one for the North American release and the other for the European Japanese release. People commonly argue which is better, and I've listened to both soundtracks and I like them both equally, to be honest. In fact, with the two soundtracks alone, that's worth replaying the game again. One playthrough with the Japanese soundtrack and the other for the North American soundtrack. But as to which is better, it's completely subjective. Is it the best in the series? Well, that's kind of hard to compare because it has MP3 quality with a CD-ROM format, while the Genesis music was on a 16-bit format. And honestly, it wouldn't be fair to compare the two. And I will say, even if there is a comparison, I will say Sonic 2's soundtrack is slightly better. In fact, Sonic 2's soundtrack is a lot more memorable than Sonic CD's soundtrack. Even though Sonic CD has an orchestra at its side, I had to play the game again just to remember a few of the tracks. While Sonic 2, one playthrough, you instantly remember all the music, especially Emerald Hill Zone and Chemical Plant Zone. And definitely Aquatic Ruin Zone. I just love that soundtrack. But back on North American and Japanese music. If you play the Metal Sonic boss level in Sonic Generations, you'll actually hear the Japanese bad future Stardust Speedway instead of the North American, showing that Sega may have a bias for the Japanese soundtrack. But wanna know something? Spencer Nielsen, who composed the Echo the Dolphin soundtrack for the Sega CD port of it, helped compose the North American soundtrack for Sonic CD. From my experience, the North American soundtrack is more creepy, apocalyptic soundtrack, while the Japanese soundtrack has the more happy, upbeat soundtrack, with a few exceptions like all of the Japanese bad future levels. Here's a few samples for you to judge for yourself. Overall, Sonic CD is a great game from start to finish. While not as good as Sonic 2, I think it's at least slightly better than the first game. If I had to give it a rating, I'd give it a 94 out of the 100. Is it the best game on the Sega CD add-on? Yes, but judging that it has such a small library, that's not really saying much. Don't get me wrong, Sonic CD is a great game, but best Sonic game ever? I'm gonna have to disagree on that. Like I said, I'll say it's better than the first Sonic, but not as good as Sonic 2 or some of the later entries. In fact, Sonic Colors is a much better game than Sonic CD. But I definitely would say it is worth checking out. I mean, I have it on the Sonic Gems collection for the GameCube, and even though that collection is a little lacking with other games, I thought it was a satisfactory purchase just for Sonic CD. I only paid $10 for it. But I would definitely recommend you get the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions as well as the mobile versions, because those are far superior than the Sonic Gems version and the original CD version. Sonic CD was a blast to play from start to finish for its save system, level design built more for exploration, gimmicky but fun boss battles, graphics, and time travel elements. In fact, I think this game handled time travel the best in any platformer. Yes, forget Sly Cooper Thieves in Time or Crash Bandicoot 3 War. I think this game handled time travel very well, kind of like how Zelda A Link to the Past handled the White World Dark World element very well, where it's a part of the existing level you're in, but not just the level itself. It kind of reminds me of Back to the Future Part 2, where Marty returns to the present, but it's a bad present because I believe the main villain, I forgot his name, Biff? He got the sports almanac, and because of that one misdeed alone, he managed to rule the entire world. Same kind of goes for Robotnik, except Robotnik's not in it for a sports almanac. In fact, there's really hardly any economy that he can use to take control of the planet with, but it's kind of the same idea, kind of not, but it kind of gave me that Back to the Future Part 2 feel. It's still excellent, but before I do my Sonic 3 and Knuckles review next week, I'll be making a top 10 best Sonic games list to see my stance on the Sonic series. And keep in mind, that list will be entirely my opinion, and it's not law, it's not fact that these 10 games are the best. These are just some of my favorites. So much for watching my rather unpopular opinion on Sonic CD. What are your thoughts on the game? Comment in the comment section below as always. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to stay awesome.